To overturn the appointed times, to obliterate the divine plans, the storms gather to strike like a flood. Enlil, Enki, and Ninhursag have decided its fate. To overturn the divine powers of Sumer, to lock up the favorable rain in its home, to destroy the city, to destroy the house, to destroy the cattle pen, and level the sheepfold, that the cattle should not stand in the pen, that the sheep should not multiply in the fold, that watercourses should carry brackish water, that weeds should grow in the fertile fields, and plants of mourning should grow in the open country.
When I was grieving for that day of storm, destined for me, laid upon me, the queen. Though I was trembling for that day of storm destined for me, I could not flee before that day's fatality. And of a sudden, I espied no happy days within my reign. Though I would tremble for that night of cruel weeping destined for me, I could not flee before that night's fatality. Dread of the storm's flood-like destruction weighed on me. And of a sudden, upon my couch, oblivion was not granted. Because this bitter anguish had been destined for my land. Even had I come to help it on the ground, I could not have pulled my people back out of the mire. Because this bitter fate had been destined for my city, even if I, bird-like, had stretched my wings, and, like a bird, had flown to my city. Yet my city would have been destroyed on its foundation, yet Ur would have perished where it lay. Because that day of storm had raised its hand, and even had I screamed out loud and cried, "Turn back, O storm, to thy desert," the storm would not have been lifted from me. Then verily, to the assembly, where the crowd had not yet risen, while the Anunna, binding themselves to uphold the decision, were still seated, I dragged my feet and I stretched out my arms. Truly I shed my tears in front of An. Truly I myself mourned in front of Enlil. May my city not be destroyed. May Ur not be destroyed. I said indeed to them, and may its people not be killed. But Anu never bent towards those words, and Enlil never said, "It is pleasing, so be it," to soothe my heart. Behold, they gave instruction that the city be destroyed. They gave instruction that Ur be destroyed, and as its destiny decreed, that its inhabitants be killed. Enlil called the storm. Winds of abundance he took from the land, good winds he took away from Sumer. The people mourn. Deputed evil winds, entrusted to King Aluda, tender of storms. He called the storm that annihilates the land. He called disastrous winds. Enlil, choosing Gibil as his helper, called the great hurricane of heaven. The blinding hurricane howling across the skies, the tempest, unsubduable like, breaks through levees, beats down upon, devours the city's ships. All these he gathered at the base of heaven. Great fires he lit that heralded the storm, and lit on either flank of furious winds the searing heat of the desert. Like flaming heat of noon, this fire scorched. The storm ordered by Enlil in hate, the storm which wears away the country, covered Ur like a cloth, veiled it like a linen sheet. On the day did that storm did leave the city, that city was a ruin. O Father Nana, that town was left a ruin. The people mourn. Its people's corpses, not potsherds, littered the approaches. The walls were gaping. The high gates, the roads, were piled with dead. In the wide streets, where feasting crowds once gathered, jumbled they lay. In all the streets and roadways, bodies lay. In open fields that used to fill with dancers, the people lay in heaps. The country's blood now filled its holes like metal in a mold, bodies dissolved, like butter left in the sun.
Nannar, god of the moon and spouse of Ningal, appeals to his father, Enlil. O my father Enlil, who engendered me, what has my city done to you? Why have you turned away from it? The ship of first fruits no longer brings first fruits, To the engendering father no longer goes into Enlil and Nippur with your bread and food portions. O my father who engendered me, fold again into your arms my city from its loneliness. O Enlil, fold again my into your arms from its loneliness. Fold again my temple Ekishnugal into your arms from its loneliness. Let renown emerge for you in Let the people expand for you. Let the ways of Sumer which have been destroyed be restored for you.
Enlil answered his son Suen, "The heart of the wasted city is weeping, for reeds of lament grow therein. Its heart is weeping, for flutes of lament grow therein. Its people spend the day in weeping. O noble Nana, be thou concerned about yourself. What truck have you with tears? There is no revoking a verdict, a decree of the assembly, a command of An and Enlil is not known ever to have been changed. Ur was verily granted a kingship, a lasting term it was not granted. From days of yore, when the country was first settled, to where it has now proceeded, whoever saw a term of office completed? Its kingship, its term of office, has been uprooted. You, my Nana, leave your city."
That the mother should not seek out her child, that the father should not say, "Oh, my dear wife," and the junior wife should take no joy in his embrace, that the young child should not grow vigorous on his knee, the wet nurse should not sing lullabies. To change the location of kingship, to defile the seeking of oracles, taking kingship away from the land, to cast the eye of the storm on all the land, to obliterate the divine plans by the order of An and Enlil. After An had frowned upon all the lands, and Enlil had looked favorably on an enemy land, after Nintu had scattered the creatures that she had created, after Enki had altered the course of the Tigris and Euphrates, and Utu had cast his curse on the roads and highways, so as to obliterate the divine powers of Sumer, to change its preordained plans, alienating the divine powers of the reign of kingship of Urim, to humiliate the princely son in his house, Ekiknujal, and break up the unity of the people of Nana, numerous as ewes, to change the food offerings of Urim, the shrine of magnificent food offerings, that its people should no longer dwell in their quarters, that they should be given over to live in an inimical place. Even Kimaki and Elam, the enemy, should dwell in their place, and its shepherd, in his own palace, should be captured by the enemy, Ibis when taken to the land Elam in fetters. From Mount Zabu on the edge of the sea to the borders of Ankan, like a swallow that has flown from its house, he should never return to his city. On the two banks of the Tigris and of the Euphrates, bad weeds should grow, that no one should set out on the road, seek out the highway. The city and its settled surroundings should be razed to ruin mounds, its numerous black-headed people slaughtered. No hoe attacks the fertile fields, that seed should not be planted in the ground. The melody of the cowherd songs should not resound in the open country, that butter and cheese should not be made in the cattle pen, that dung should not be stacked on the ground. The shepherd encloses not the sacred sheepfold with a fence, that the song of the churning should not resound in the sheepfold, to decimate the animals of the open country, to finish off all living things, that the four-legged creatures of Kakan should lay no more dung on the ground, that the marshes should be so dry as to be full of cracks and have no new seed. Sickly-headed reeds should grow in the reed beds, covered by a stinking morass. There should be no new growth in the orchards. It should all collapse by itself, so as quickly to subdue Urim like a roped ox, to bow its neck to the ground. The great charging wild bull, confident in its own strength, the primeval city of lordship and kingship, built on sacred ground. Its fate cannot be changed. Who can overturn it? It is the command of An and Enlil. Who can oppose it?
Anu frightened the very dwellings of Sumer, the people were afraid. Enlil blew an evil storm, silence lay upon the city. A devastating deluge shall be invoked. Its scales shall be a harrow, its back shall be flames, its countenance shall be a malevolent storm that enshrouds heaven and earth. The glint of its eyes shall be lightning that flashes far like the ansud bird. Its mouth shall be grotesque, a blaze that extends as far as the nether world. Its tongue shall be an inferno, raining embers that sunders the land. Its arms shall be the majestic ansud bird that nothing can escape when it spreads wide its talons. Its ribs shall be crowbars that let light pass inside like the sun's rays. Knotted at both its hips shall be city-destroying slingstones. Its great haunches shall be dripping knives covered with gore that make blood flow. Its muscles shall be saws that slash, its feet those of an eagle. It shall make the Tigris and Euphrates quaver. It shall make the mountains rumble. At its reverberation the hills shall be uprooted. The people shall be pitched about like sheaves. Sumer and Akkad shall shiver. They shall be flooded like a harvest crop. The foolish shall rejoice. They shall exclaim, "Let it come. We shall be seeing war and battle in the city, how the sacred precinct is destroyed, how the walls are battered down, how the city's peace is disrupted, how among the loyal families honest men are transformed into traitors. But the sensible shall beat their breasts and droop their heads. At midnight they shall toss about tearfully and suffer insomnia. In bed, under the covers, they shall be unable to sleep soundly. They shall wander about the city. They shall wring their hands. Their courage shall run out. May our allies serving in times of war mobilize their forces for peace. May the word of Enlil be sent back. May it turn tail. May the venom of Nunamnir's anger become exhausted. May those vicious men who have seized the Ikur be punished. May those who have set their sight upon Nibiru be swept away. Nintud bolted the door of the storehouses of the land. Enki blocked the water in the Tigris and the Euphrates. Utu took away the pronouncement of equity and justice. Inanna handed over victory in strife and battle to a rebellious land. Ningirsu poured Sumer away like milk to the dogs. Turmoil descended upon the land, something that no one had ever known, something unseen, which had no name, something that could not be fathomed. The lands were confused in their fear, the god of the city turned away, its shepherd vanished. The people in their fear breathed only with difficulty. The storm immobilized them, the storm did not let them return. There was no return for them, the time of captivity did not pass. What did Enlil, the shepherd of the black-headed people, do? Enlil, to destroy the loyal households, to decimate the loyal men, to put the evil eye on the sons of the loyal men. On the firstborn, Enlil then sent down Gutium from the mountains. Their advance was as the flood of Enlil that cannot be withstood. The great wind of the countryside filled the countryside, it advanced before them. The extensive countryside was destroyed. No one moved about there. The dark time was roasted by hailstones and flames. The bright time was wiped out by a shadow. On that bloody day mouths were crushed, heads were crashed. The storm was a harrow coming from above. The city was struck by a hoe. On that day heaven rumbled, the earth trembled, the storm worked without respite. Heaven was darkened, it was covered by a shadow. The mountains roared, Utu lay down at the horizon. Dust passed over the mountains. Nana lay at the zenith, the people were afraid. The city silent, no one stepped outside. The foreigners in the city even chased away its dead. Large trees were uprooted, the forest growth was ripped out. The orchards were stripped of their fruit, they were cleaned of their offshoots. The crop drowned while it was still on the stalk, the yield of the grain diminished. They piled up in heaps, they spread out like sheaves. There were corpses floating in the Euphrates. Brigands roamed the roads. The father turned away from his wife without saying, "Oh, my wife." The mother turned away from her child without saying, "Oh, my child." He who had a productive estate neglected his estate without saying, "Oh, my estate." The rich man took an unfamiliar path away from his possessions. In those days the kingship of the land was defiled. The tiara and crown that had been on the king's head were both spoiled. The lands that had followed the same path were split into disunity. The food offerings of Urim, the shrine of magnificent food offerings, were changed for the worse. Nana traded away his people, numerous as ewes. Its king sat immobilized in the palace, all alone. Ibi Suen was sitting in anguish in the palace, all alone. In Enam Tila, his place of delight, he wept bitterly. The devastating flood was leveling everything. Like a great storm, it roared over the earth. Who could escape it? To destroy the city, to destroy the house, so that traitors would lie on top of loyal men and the blood of traitors flow upon loyal men. The storms gathered to strike like a flood. The city watched as the evil ghost approached. The city trembled. A defiled hand smote him and flattened his skull. The city collapsed. The fearsome radiance overwhelmed each and every observer. The capital city, canal inspector for all the lands, became like one who spreads havoc. The faithful cowherds themselves overturned every single cattle pen. The chief shepherds themselves burned every sheepfold. The house of Kich, Horsaj Kalama, was destroyed. Zababa took an unfamiliar path away from his beloved dwelling. Mother Bao was lamenting bitterly in her Iirikug.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Kazalu, the city of teeming multitudes, was cast into confusion. Numukta took an unfamiliar path away from the city, his beloved dwelling. His wife Namrat, the beautiful lady, was lamenting bitterly.
Alas, my destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Its riverbed was empty, no water flowed. Like a river cursed by Enki, its opening channel was dammed up. On the fields, fine grains grew no more. People had nothing to eat. The orchards were scorched like an oven. Its open country was scattered. The four-legged wild animals did not run about. The four-legged creatures of Kakan could find no rest. Lugal Marda stepped outside his city. Ninswana took an unfamiliar path away from her beloved dwelling.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Isin, the shrine that was not a key, was split by onrushing waters. Nininsina, the mother of the land, wept bitter tears.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Enlil smote Duranki with a mace. Enlil made lamentation in his city, the shrine Nibiru. Mother Ninlil, the lady of the Kior shrine, wept bitter tears. Kek, built all alone on the high open country, was haunted. Adab, the settlement which stretches out along the river, was treated as a rebellious land, deprived of water. The snake of the mountains made his lair there. It became a rebellious land. The Gutians bred there, issued their seed. Nintud wept bitter tears over her creatures.
Alas, the destroyed city. Alas, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. In Zabalam, the sacred Kiguna was haunted. Inanna abandoned Unuk and went off to enemy territory. In the Aena, the enemy set eyes upon the sacred Jipar shrine. The sacred Jipar of Ainship was defiled. Its end priest was snatched from the Jipar and carried off to enemy territory. A violent storm blew over Amma, brickwork in the midst of the highlands. Kara took an unfamiliar path away from the Ema, his beloved dwelling. Ninmul cried bitter tears over her destroyed city.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Jirsu, the city of heroes, was afflicted with a lightning storm. Ninjirsu took an unfamiliar path away from the Eninu. On that day, the word of Enlil was an attacking storm. Who could fathom it? The word of Enlil was destruction on the right, it was destruction on the left. What did Enlil do in order to decide the fight of mankind? Enlil brought down the Elamites, the enemy, from the highlands. Nance, the noble daughter, was settled outside the city. Fire approached Ninmarki in the shrine Gu Abba. Large boats were carrying off its silver and lapis lazuli. The lady, sacred Ninmarki, was despondent because of her perished goods. Then the day of sorrow, burning like fire. The province of Lagak was handed over to Elam, and then the queen also reached the end of her time. Bao, as if she were human, also reached the end of her time.
Woe is me! Enlil has handed over the city to the storm. He has handed it over to the storm that destroys cities. He has handed it over to the storm that destroys houses.
Domusid Abzu was full of fear in the house of Kinirka. Kinirza, the city of her noble youth, was ordered to be plundered. The city of Nance, Nijin, was delivered to the foreigners. Sirara, her beloved dwelling, was handed over to the evil ones.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Its sacred Jipar of Enship was defiled. Its end priest was snatched from the Jipar and carried off to enemy territory. Mighty strength was set against the banks of the Idnuna Nana Canal. The settlements of the Dana of Nana, like substantial cattle pens, were destroyed. Their refugees, like stampeding goats, were chased by dogs. They destroyed Gayak like milk poured out to dogs and shattered its finely fashioned statues. A lament was raised at the dais that stretches out toward heaven. Its heavenly throne was not set up, was not fit to be crowned. It was cut down as if it were a date palm and tied together. Aku, the settlement that stretches out along the river, was deprived of water. At the place of Nana where evil had never walked, the enemy walked. How was the house treated thus? The Epuhruma was emptied. Kiabrig, which used to be filled with numerous cows and numerous calves, was destroyed like a mighty cattle pen. Ningubalak took an unfamiliar path away from the Jabur. Niniagar wept bitter tears all alone.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. Its sacred Jipar of Enship was defiled. Its end priest was snatched from the Jipar and carried off to enemy territory. Ninazu deposited his weapon in a corner in the Egida. An evil storm swept over Ninhursaja at the Enutura. Like a pigeon she flew from the window. She stood apart in the open country.
Alas, the destroyed city. Alas, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. In Jigbanda, the house that was filled with lamentation, lamentation reeds grew. Ninjitzida took an unfamiliar path away from Jigbanda. Azimua, the queen of the city, wept bitter tears.
Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house.
She cried bitterly. On that day, the storm forced people to live in darkness. Ninehama in her fear wept bitter tears.
Alas, my destroyed city. Alas, my destroyed house.
Asaluhi put his robes on with haste, and Lugalbanda took an unfamiliar path away from his beloved dwelling. Eridug, floating on great waters, was deprived of drinking water. In its outer environs had turned into haunted plains.
I, a young man whom the storm has not destroyed, still fall. My attractiveness not brought to an end, we have been struck down like statues being cast in molds. The Gutians, the Vandals, are wiping us out. We turn to Father Enki in the Abzu of Eridug. What can we say? What more can we add? We have been driven out of Eridug. We who were in charge of the city during the day are eclipsed by shadows. We who were in charge of the city during the night are ravaged by the storm. How shall we receive among our weary ones him who was in charge during the day? How shall we let him who was in charge by night go astray among our sleepless ones? Enki, your city has been cursed. It has been given to an enemy land. Why do they reckon us among those who have been displaced from Eridug? Why do they destroy us like palm trees, us who were not violent?
In Urim, no one went to fetch food. No one went to fetch water. Those who went to fetch food went away from the food and will not return. Those who went to fetch water went away from the water and will not return. To the south, the Elamites stepped in, slaughtering. In the uplands, the Vandals, the enemy, the Tidnum daily strapped the mace to their loins. To the south, the Elamites, like an onrushing wave, were rising. In the uplands, like chaff blowing in the wind, they roll over the open country. Urim, like a great charging wild bull, bowed its neck to the ground. What did Enlil, who decides the fates, then do? Again he sent down the Elamites, the enemy from the mountains. 3 days and 3 nights did not pass, and the city was raked by a hoe. Dumusid left Kisiga like a prisoner of war. His hands were fettered. She rode away from her possessions. She went to the mountains. She loudly sang out a lament over those brightly lit mountains.
I am queen, but I shall have to ride away from my possessions, and now I shall be a slave in those parts. I shall have to ride away from my silver and lapis lazuli. Their slavery, who can survive it? Alas, the destroyed city, my destroyed house, she cried bitterly.
My queen, though not the enemy, went to enemy land. Enlil threw open the door of the grand gate to the wind. In Urim no one went to fetch food, no one went to fetch water. Its people rushed around like water being poured from a well. Their strength ebbed away, they could not even go on their way. Enlil afflicted the city with an evil famine. He afflicted the city with that which destroys cities, that which destroys houses. He afflicted the city with that which cannot be withstood with weapons. In Urim, which was like a solitary reed, there was not even fear. Its people, like fish being grabbed in a pond, sought to escape. Its young and old lay spread about. No one could rise. At the royal station there was no food on top of the platform. The king who used to eat marvelous food grabbed at a mere ration. As the day grew dark, the eye of the sun was eclipsing. The people experienced hunger. There was no beer in the beer hall. There was no more malt for it. There was no food for him in his palace. It was unsuitable to live in. Grain did not fill his lofty storehouse. He could not save his life. The grain piles and granaries of Nana held no grain. The evening meal in the great dining hall of the gods was defiled. Wine and syrup ceased to flow in the great dining hall. The butcher's knife that used to slay oxen and sheep lay hungry in the grass. Its mighty oven no longer cooked oxen and sheep. It no longer emitted the aroma of roasting meat. The sounds of the Bursaj building, the pure temple of Nana, was stilled. The shining key of Nana was silted up. The sound of water against the boat's prow ceased. There was no rejoicing. Dust piled up in the Anurabanda of Nana. The rushes grew. The morning reeds grew. Boats and barges ceased docking at the shining quay. Nothing moved on your watercourse which was fit for barges. The boat with first fruit offerings of the father who begot Nana no longer brought first fruit offerings. Its food offerings could not be taken to Enlil in Nibiru. Its watercourse was empty. Barges could not travel. There were no paths on either of its banks. Long grass grew there. The reed fence of the well-stocked cattle pen of Nana was split open. The reed huts were overrun, their walls were breached. The cows and their young were captured and carried off to enemy territory. The Munzer-fed cows took an unfamiliar path in an open country that they did not know. Gayau, who loves cows, dropped his weapon in the dung. Kunidug, who stores butter and cheese, did not store butter and cheese. Those who are unfamiliar with butter were churning the butter. Those who are unfamiliar with milk were curdling the milk. The sound of the churning vat did not resound in the cattle pen. Suen wept to his father Enlil.
O father who begot me, why have you turned away from my city, which was built for you? O Enlil, why have you turned away from my Urim, which was built for you? The boat with first fruit offerings no longer brings first fruit offerings to the father who begot him. Your food offerings can no longer be brought to Enlil in Nibiru. The priests of the countryside and city have been carried off by phantoms. Urim, like a city raked by a hoe, is to be counted as a ruined mound. The Ki Ur, Enlil's resting place, has become a haunted shrine. O Enlil, gaze upon your city. Gaze upon your city, Nibiru, an empty wasteland. The dogs of Urim no longer sniff at the base of the city wall. The man who used to drill large wells scratches the ground in the marketplace. My father, who begot me, enclose in your embrace my city, which is all alone. Enlil, return to your embrace my Urim. Enclose in your embrace my Ikik Nujal. May you bring forth offspring in Urim. May you multiply its people. May you restore the divine powers of Sumer that have been forgotten.
Enlil then answered his son Suen.
O Nana, noble son, why do you concern yourself with crying? The judgment uttered by the assembly cannot be reversed. The word of An and Enlil knows no overturning. Urim was indeed given kingship, but it was not given an eternal reign. From time immemorial, since the land was founded, until people multiplied, who has ever seen a reign of kingship that would take precedence forever? The reign of its kingship had been long indeed, but had to exhaust itself. O my Nana, do not exert yourself in vain. Abandon your city.
Then my king, the noble son, became distraught. Lord Akimbabar, the noble son, grieved. Nana, who loves his city, left his city. Suen took an unfamiliar path away from his beloved Urim. In order to go as an exile from her city to foreign territory, Ningal quickly clothed herself and left the city. The Anuna stepped outside of Urim. The evil wind approached Urim. The trees of Urim were sick. Its reeds were sick. Laments sounded all along its city wall. Daily there was slaughter before it. Large axes were sharpened in front of Urim. The spears, the arms of battle, were prepared. The large bows, javelin and shield gathered together to strike. The barbed arrows covered its outer side like a raining cloud. Large stones, one after another, fell with great thuds. Daily the evil wind returned in the city. Urim, confident in its own strength, stood ready for the murderers. Its people, oppressed by the enemy, could not withstand their weapons. In the city, those who had not been felled by weapons succumbed to hunger. Hunger filled the city like water. It would not cease. This hunger contorted people's faces, twisted their muscles. Its people were as if drowning in a pond. They gasped for breath. Its king breathed heavily in his palace all alone. Its people dropped their weapons hit the ground. They struck their necks with their hands and cried. They sought counsel with each other. Alas, what can we say about it? What more can we add to it? How long until we are finished off by this catastrophe? Inside Urim there is death. Outside it there is death. Inside it we are to be finished off by famine. Outside it we are to be finished off by Elamite weapons. In Urim the enemy oppresses us. Oh, we are finished. The people took refuge behind the city walls. They were united in fear. The palace that was destroyed by onrushing water was defiled, its door bolts were torn out. Like a swelling flood wave, it left only the ghosts. In Urim people were smashed as if they were clay pots. Its refugees were unable to flee, they were trapped inside the walls. Like fish living in a pond, they tried to escape. The enemy seized the Ikik Nujal of Nana. They ripped out its heavy doors. The statues that were in the treasury were cut down. The great stewardess Niniega ran away from the storehouse. Its throne was cast down before it. She threw herself down into the dust. Its mighty cows with shining horns were captured. Their horns were cut off. Its unblemished oxen and grass-fed sheep were slaughtered. They were cut down as date palms and were tied together. The palm trees, strong as mighty copper, the heroic strength, were torn out like rushes. Their trunks were turned sideways. Their tops lay in the dust. There was no one to raise them. The midriffs of their palm fronds were cut off and their tops were burnt off. The fertile reeds, which grew in the sacred river, were defiled.
The great tribute that they had collected was hauled off to the mountains. The house's great door ornament fell down, its parapet was destroyed. The wild animals that were intertwined on its left and right lay before it like heroes smitten by heroes. Its gaping-mouthed dragons and its awe-inspiring lions were pulled down with ropes like captured wild bulls and carried off to enemy territory. The fragrance of the sacred seat of Nana, formerly like a fragrant cedar grove, was destroyed, its architrave of gold and lapis lazuli. The glory of the house, whose glory was once so lovely, was extinguished. Like a storm that fills all the lands, it was built there like twilight in the heavens. Its doors adorned with the heavenly stars. Its great bronze latches were torn out, its hinges asunder. Together with its door fittings, it wept bitterly like a fugitive. The bolt, the holy lock, and the great door were not fastened for it. The noise of the door being fastened had ceased. There was no one to fasten it. The food offerings of his royal dining place were altered. In its sacred place, the instruments did not sound, did not perform its sacred song. Verdicts were not given at the Dublama, the place where oaths used to be taken. The throne was not set up at its place of judgment. Justice was not administered. Alamag threw down his scepter, his hands trembling. In the sacred bedchamber of Nana, musicians no longer played the balaj drum. The sacred box that no one had set eyes upon was seen by the enemy. The divine bed was not set up. It was not spread with clean hay. The statues that were in the treasury were cut down. The cook, the dream interpreter, and the seal keeper did not perform the ceremonies properly. They stood by submissively and were carried off by the foreigners. The holy Uzezga priests of the sacred lustrations, the linen-clad priests, forsook the divine plans and sacred divine powers. They went off to a foreign city. In his grief, Suen approached his father. He went down on his knee in front of Enlil, the father who begot him. O Father who begot me, how long will the enemy eye be cast upon my account? How long, Father Enlil? The lordship and the kingship that you bestowed, Father Enlil, the one who advises with just words, the wise words of the land. Your inimical judgment, O Father, look into your darkened heart, terrifying like waves. O Father Enlil, the fate that you have decreed cannot be explained.
Enlil then provided a favorable response to his son Suen. My son, the city built for you in joy and prosperity was given to you as your reign. The destroyed city, the great wall, the walls with broken battlements, all this too is part of that reign, the black days of the reign that has been your lot. As for dwelling in your home, the Etem and Nibiru, that was properly built, indeed Urim shall be rebuilt in splendor, the people shall bow down to you. There is to be bounty at its base, there is to be grain, there is to be splendor at its top, the sun shall rejoice there. Let an abundance of grain embrace its table. May Urim, the city whose fate was pronounced by An, be restored for you. Having pronounced his blessing, Enlil raised his head toward the heavens. May the land, south and highland, be organized for Nana. May the roads of the mountains be set in order for Suen. Like a cloud hugging the earth, they shall submit to him. By order of An and Enlil, it shall be conferred.
May An not change the divine powers of heaven, the divine plans for treating the people with justice. May An not change the decisions and judgments to lead the people properly, to travel on the roads of the land. May An and Enlil not change it. May Enki and Ninma not change it. That the Tigris and Euphrates should again carry water, that there should be rain in the skies and on the ground speckled barley, that there should be watercourses with water and fields with grain, that the marshes should support fish and fowl, that old reeds and fresh reeds should grow in the reed beds. May An and Enlil not change it. May Enki and Ninma not change it. That the orchards should bear syrup and grapes, that the high plain should bear the macaroon tree, that there should be long life in the palace, that the sea should bring forth every abundance. The land densely populated from south to uplands, may An and Enlil not change it. May Enki and Ninma not change it. That cities should be rebuilt, that people should be numerous, that in the whole universe the people should be cared for. O Nana, your kingship is sweet, return to your place. May a good abundant rain be long-lasting in Urim. Let its people lie down in safe pastures, let them reproduce. After the cattle pen had been built for the foremost divine powers, how did it become a haunted place? When will it be restored? Where once the brick of fate had been laid, who scattered its divine powers? The lamentation is reprised. How did the storeroom of Nibiru, the shrine Duranki, become a haunted place? How did they become haunted? When will they be restored? How did the true city become empty? Its precious designs have been defiled. How were the city's festivals neglected? Its magnificent rites have been thrown into disorder. In the heart of Nibiru, where the divine powers were allotted and the black-headed people prolifically multiplied, the city's heart no longer revealed any sign of intelligence. There where the Anuna used to give advice. In Upku Unkena, the place for making great judgments, they no longer impart decisions or justice. where its gods had established their dwellings, where their daily rations were offered, their daises erected, where the sacred royal offering and the evening meal in their great banquet hall were destined for the pouring out of choice beer and syrup. Nibiru, the city where the black-headed people used to cool themselves in its spreading shade, in their dwellings Enlil fell upon them as if they were criminals. It was he who sent them scattering, like a scattered herd of cattle. How long until its lady, the goddess Ninlil, would ask after the inner city, whose bitter tears were overwhelming? As though it were empty wasteland, no one enters that great temple, whose bustle of activity was famous. As for all the great rulers who increased the wealth of the city of Nibiru, why did they disappear? For how long would Enlil neglect the land, where the black-headed people ate rich grass like sheep? Tears, lamentation, depression, and despair. How long would his spirit burn and his heart not be placated? Why were those who once played the Siem and Allah drums spending their time in bitter lamenting? Why were the lamenters sitting in its brick buildings? They were bewailing the hardship which beset them. The men whose wives had fallen, whose children had fallen, were singing, "Oh, our destroyed city!" Their city gone, their homes abandoned, as those who were singing for the brick buildings of the good city, as the lamenters of wailing like the foster children of an ecstatic, no longer knowing their own intelligence. The people were smitten, their minds thrown into disorder. The true temple wails bitterly. It weeps bitter tears over the splendid rites and most precious plants which are desecrated, its most sacred food rations neglected and made into funeral offerings. It cries, "Alas!" The true temple, which it is bitter to enter on one's own, passes the time in tears. Because the ceilings of the abundant material stored in the temple have been broken open, they have placed the loads on the ground. Because the property in its well-tended storehouses has been sent back, it says, "What will they weigh out for me now?" Because the enemies who do not know good from evil have cut off all good things, it sings a bitter dirge. Because they have finished off its populace there like animals, it cries, "O my land!" Because they have piled up the young women, young men, and their little children like heaps of grain, it cries, "Woe for them!" Because they have splashed their blood on the ground like a rainstorm, there is no restraint to its crying. The temple, like a cow whose calf is cut off, groans bitterly to itself. It is grief-stricken, and the sweet-voiced lamenters, like nursemaids singing a lullaby, respond tearfully with its name. In anguish, they bewail the fact that the city's Lord has smashed heads there, that he has looked away from it and toward a foreign land instead. The true temple of all the countries, which had come before him, what have the black-headed people, who had taken a true path, done? What have they forsaken, that their Lord has become enraged with them and walks in anger? It voices bitter cries because he has removed the great divine powers from within it. How long will the city's Lord who became angry with it not turn to it, not say, "Alas," for it? Why did he cut off the road to its brickwork? He made the noisy pigeons fly away from their windows. Why did he transform the appearance of the temple which knew voices, where they used to while away the days in sweet playing of tiki drums in the brick buildings? The temple, once a place to offer salutations in humility, is now as deathly silent as a temple which no one reveres. As though its purification priest's equipment were not utterly sacred, as though its cleansing rites did not bring calm in all countries, he has abandoned it, turned his breast away from it. Among dejection and lamentation, he has made it a sacrilege. After its fate, how long till his face would be streaked with teardrops? He rejected it thus as though it were a blasphemy. Why has joy left its brickwork? Night and day he has filled its heart with tears. Even now, he has made it foreign and a sacrilege. Its Lord, who has despoiled it like an evil wind, has destroyed that city and its temples. He has ripped out their foundations, struck them with the adze, killed wives and their children within it. He has turned that city into a deserted city. When would he restore its ancient property? Its possessions have been carried off by the wind. Enlil turned the city which used to be there into a city no longer. He made its mind wander. He threw its intelligence into disorder and made it haunted. He took away its food and its water. He brought to an end its days of familiarity with milk and with beer. The temple which he has made a sacrilege utters bitter lamentations. He has made its eyes blurred with tears. The lamenters who perform the dirges respond to it sorrowfully. No one touches the arm of the city's Lord who has removed its divine powers. How did Enlil make all his greatest divine powers fly away? No one ever touches his arm. No one ever intercedes. I am going down to my dirge singer of bitter fates, and I shall weep tearfully to him. Even now the lamenters who are expert in song make ululating wails over me. Now my people who are overcome by hardship voice laments for me one by one. Even now the places of refuge of my people whose hearts are burning in dark distress have been made known to me. My people whose hearts have been broken on the bitter way perform the lullabies of my young ones for me in tears. The well-built houses, ladies' dwellings, were falsely founded, and they have been eroded by the winds. They are making a lament for me of how the foe has finished off my land. They are addressing the cries of my heart, overwhelmed with bitterness, in order to soothe it. They are beginning their laments about my lord Enlil. He will have mercy and compassion on me, Enlil, father of the black-headed people, he who will give the order to restore me. My heart is dark, I am destroyed, I am in chaos, I have been devastated. In the foremost brick buildings they sing that your fate is bitter. Even now who will accept your tears for you, weeping bitter tears of your own accord, speak supplications to your Lord himself concerning what he did to you, concerning that fate. Say to him, my Lord, how long? Look upon me with favor, my Lord. Say, may your heart be soothed for me. Overturn this sacrilege for your own good. Say, re-enter for me your dwelling in my darkened shrines. Perhaps by this means I can make him have compassion and mercy for you. Depression has weakened your heart, but I am the one who has established good cheer for you. He will fix it forever as your lot, that you shall lift your head high. He will make good again the hostilities he is directing against you. Even now your Lord has smitten the enemy fury for you. He has had mercy on you and decreed your fate. He has said enough, so that he has removed lamentation from your brick buildings. In good mood and with a joyful heart he has entered in there again for you. Ninurta, the mighty commissioner, has looked after things. He stood there before the hero, his provider Ikme Dagan, and issued the command to him to completely rebuild the Ikor, the most precious shrine. He has restored its ancient property. Enlil has ordered Ikme Dagan to restore its ziggurat temple, to make it shine like the day, to make fitting the dais upon its platform. He has put back in their place the rites which the enemy disordered and desecrated, along with the scattered divine powers. He has given him his sacred, unchangeable decision that they should sanctify and purify again the cleansing rites which the enemy had put a stop to. He has told Ikme Dagan, his beloved shepherd, that spirited bulls and spirited bucks should be slaughtered. When decrees the fate of the sacred royal offering place, he will offer salutations and stand there daily in supplication and prayer. How long before you will rest at ease? How long will the brickwork strain its eyes upwards in tears and lamentations? Even now your Lord, the great mountain Enlil, supreme in the universe, has removed lamentation from your brick buildings and made favorable your humor. Now, city, your Lord who has had compassion and mercy for you, Father Enlil, Lord of all countries, who has commanded that you be restored, and the great mother Nanlil, who entreated him in prayer there, and the brickwork itself which said to him, steady the trembling of Nibiru, and said to him, rebuild my women's quarters for me, re-establish my temples for me. He who mulled things over so that he came to a decision about them, Enlil, who found agreeable his command of true words, who beneficently entered the true temple which had suffered destruction, he himself is removing what he turned upon you in distress. Just as he silenced you, When he made joy enter again, he decreed as your fate the sound of choice beer and syrup being poured out to overflowing. Enough! It is time to stifle the lament, he said to you himself. Because you have been living in a state of neglect, Enlil, who has decreed your fate, has said, My city, you have placated my sacred heart towards you. He has returned to you. Nibiru, you have placated my sacred heart towards you. Nibiru, true city, he has decreed your great fate and made your reign long. Enlil himself has commanded Ikmedagan that the Echo should shine like the day. Steady sunlight shines into the Ki'ur. He has brought daylight in there again for you. Ninlil has decreed your fate in the Hajikwa. Enlil and Ninlil together founded Daces in the Ekur. They dined there and enjoyed choice beer. They deliberated how to make the black-headed people secure in their dwellings. They have brought back to you the people who had been completely devastated. They have gathered back together the children whom they turned away from their mothers. The populace goes with you in their secure strongholds. Shrine Nibiru, great mountain Enlil has returned to you. How you suffer, how depression exhausts you. Even now they command Ikme Dagan that Sumer and Akkad should be restored at your feet, that their scattered people should be returned to their nests. They have brought the news that the magnificent rites of Eridug would not be forgotten, its heart sending forth wisdom, so that good sense should be allotted. The Anuna, the lords who decree fates, order that Adab should be rebuilt, the city whose lady fashions living things, who promotes birthing, and an Enlil have advised that Urim should be restored, founded in a pasture, its divine powers distinct from the rest. They command the prince of the city Larsa, the herald of the universe, the judge of the numerous people, to secure its foundations, to follow the proper path. They have taken a decision concerning Unukolaba, the sacred city, the handiwork of the gods, and restored it. They have brought news of the removal of all foes and enemies from the region of Zabalam, the city where the mistress of heaven concentrated her forces. An and Enlil have looked with their beneficent gaze on Lagak, the mooring pole of heaven, and the shrine Jersu, established long ago. It is the great gods who have commanded that the foundations of Kik should be secured. Marad, the city in whose river water flows, in whose fields is fine grain, the Anuna who took those things away from it returned them to it again. Isin, the provisioner of the Anuna, awe-inspiring since times of old. And Enlil, Enki and Ninmah have made its reign long. By their command they have handed it over and expressed their approval. They have entrusted it to Ninuta, the champion, the strong hero. They have told Ninisina, the exalted child of An, to rest calmly in her sacred dwelling. They have told Damu, the chief barber of Nunamnir, healer of the living, to make the foreign countries bow at the feet of his father and mother. Now see, Enlil has fixed a good day in the land. He himself has restored the day for Sumer and Akkad to expand. He has set aside the day for houses to be built and storerooms to be enclosed, the day for seeds to sprout and living things to be born. He has brought out the day for building cattle pens and founding sheepfolds. The ewes which bore lambs have filled the pens. The goats which bore kids have filled the folds. He himself has set the day for turning destruction to the good. He has brought in Ikme Dagan as assistance for the day for establishing justice in the land. Although Sumer and Akkad had been desecrated by the foe, afterwards hearts were appeased, spirits soothed. All the great gods thus had compassion. They looked upon those sunk in exhaustion and brought them up out of it. They restored your city which had been razed to ruins. Enlil, king of all countries, restored its shining property which had been scattered, which had been devastated. There where the populace rested in the cool after building their nests in Nibiru, the mountain of the greatest divine powers. At Enlil's word, the Anuna, those very lords who determined the fates, ordered that the temples which they had forsaken and the jewels put there long ago which had been carried off by the wind should all be restored. He has established their dining in joy within. Enlil has given the command to Ikme Dagan, his joyous, reverent sacral officiant who daily serves to sanctify its food, to purify its water. Father Enlil, the Lord whose command cannot be altered, Prince of all countries, has fixed among the black-headed people and commanded for their benefit a time when no one is to speak hostile words to another, when a son is to respect his father, a time to establish humility in the land, for the inferior to be as important as the mighty, a time when the younger brother, fearing his big brother, is to show humility, a time when the elder child is to treat the younger child reasonably and to pay heed to his words, a time to take neither weak nor strong away into captivity, but to serve with great acts of good, a time to travel the disordered roadways, to extirpate evil growths, a time when anyone is to go where they will, to hurl no insults at one's fellow, a time to go from one's own city to a foreign city, to have no fear on the plain, to perform no sacrilege, a time to remove bitterness from the land, to establish light therein, a time when darkness is to be lifted in the land, so that living things should rejoice. Now see, after that time Enlil, the prince who is full of pity, has been beneficent to his hero who had laid the first brick. He put in order again for him the divine powers which had been desecrated by the enemy. He sanctified again the defiled rites for him. He purified its ziggurat temple and made it resplendent for him. Within he made abundance plentiful. He filled it with choice beer and syrup. He established there at that time the pleasing of hearts, the appeasing of spirits, the ameliorating of moods. Ikme Dagon himself stood in prayer to Enlil and offered salutations. When he had begun the lament and spoken the supplication, the prince of all countries treated his body with oil of abundance, as if it were the sweetest syrup, and his prayer was heard. Enlil looked upon him with favor, Ikme Dagon, whose words bring Enlil pleasure. Enlil's constant attendant, with whose thoughts he agrees. Because the humble one prostrated himself in his devotions and served there, because he will entreat him in supplication and will do obeisance, because he will complete and honor the royal offering and will return, because he will keep watch over everything and will not be negligent. Enlil has promised to Ikme Dagon his dominion of extended years. He promised him that he will be a man of preeminent kingship. He promised him that he will be a king whose reign is good. He promised him that he shall have the people inhabit safe dwellings. Enlil found agreement in what he had said to the numerous people. On the day for decreeing fates, every part of Sumer and Akkad, among the black-headed people flocking like sheep, among their well-tended people, will praise forever the majesty of the great mountain Nunamnir, Inkara weapon of the universe. It is his awe-inspiring way.